Tenacity. Persistent in maintaining, adhering to, or seeking something valued or desired. Not often one of those words that get described to punters, but today, I'm going to tell you about the most tenacious punter I've ever heard of, Bryce Baringer. You see, I use the term tenacious instead of a swath of other words when describing Bryce. Persistent just kind of made me think of somebody who kept applying to jobs until he got one. Determined maybe seemed more like just a highly motivated individual, and resolute made me think of a strong, silent type, willing to just wait through everything. And while Bryce may be able to use a number of these words to describe him, I think the best is tenacious. Because to me, tenacious is the word you describe the guy that you shot twice in the stomach and left to die, but 2 weeks later he's outside your house with a machete. You look at that and go, that motherfucker is tenacious. To understand why Bryce gets this definition, we have to take it all the way back to the start of 2017 when he came to college. As a freshman, he was able to get a walk-on spot at Illinois, and trust me when I say, that's no easy feat. But he would soon find out that his way onto the field would be just as hard as he would spend a year on the bench behind current CFL punter Blake Hayes. With Blake having come in at the same time as Bryce, it would not have been in Bryce's best interest to stay and sit behind him for what would be his entire career, pushing him to the transfer portal, which is where things turned out for the worst. You see, not everybody who transfers will find a home, but Bryce took his chances at Michigan State University that spring because they, at the time, only had one punter on the roster, senior Jake Hartberger. This would not prove to be fruitful for Bryce. In his first tryout attempt, he failed to crack the roster spot, with coaches claiming they had too many people on the team already. Things wouldn't get easier in the fall as he still wasn't on the roster at the start of the season, but one man's misery became another man's joy. In a fateful game against Arizona State, Jake Hartberger broke his leg on a play that unfortunately was never supposed to happen. A horrible twist of fate for Jake, but a foot in the door for Bryce as they called him up after that game because they needed to have a second punter on hand. From there, he would split reps with Tyler Hunt, a tight end. For Bryce, this seemed like the turnaround he needed. Now, Tyler did get the first couple of reps again against Indiana, but with a little over 3 minutes left in the first half, close to midfield, history was going to be made. He was about to come out there and take over the game. Okay, well, the first punt kind of sucked, right? But the second half, he was going to show off that elite level. Okay, not much better there, and no sooner was he on the field than he was back off it, losing his job to Tyler. 2 years, everything having to go right for him just to get 2 punts and a 34-yard average and find himself right back on the bench. Not the story most people were expecting for his first game, but if it were easier, I wouldn't call him the most tenacious punter, would I? Because Tyler would play another 4 games. Then, in one fateful practice, one horrible twist of fate, Tyler puts Bryce's foot back in the door. On the game week preparing for Purdue, Tyler unfortunately tears his ACL, which would leave Bryce to be the starting punter, and he would get his chance to be the guy. 4 punts, all to himself, and with everything coming in the third and fourth quarter, he did all right. A 38.5-yard average, maybe nothing to write home about, but it kept his backup on the bench for the time being, which, for how his first game went, meant that his luck was trending in a slight upward direction. Against Maryland, though, things wouldn't keep this upward trend. For lack of better words, Bryce did bad. Real bad. He opened up with a 50-yarder, which would prove to be one of his few bright spots that day as his next punt wouldn't break 20 yards past the line of scrimmage. Then a short field punt found its way even shorter to nab him, if nothing else, inside the 20 stat point. Then another short field punt to moderate success, only going 26 yards past the line of scrimmage. And then one more brutal 8-yard punt. And then he hits his last decently far punt of the night with a 52-yarder that went for a touchback, still netting it to be a net negative. And this game was a certified nightmare, and it was very clear that the Spartans won here in spite of Bryce and without much thanks to him, as he averaged less than 30 yards a punt. Things wouldn't get much better for him against Ohio State. He opened with a 42-yard punt, which was okay, but after a 24-yarder, the coaching staff had seen enough. Bryce was back to where he was a year ago, on the bench after just being handed the keys to the kingdom. That offseason, Michigan State roster became full once again. At least 2 full for Bryce, who was just playing for them not 6 months ago. He had been cut. For many people, this would have been the end of the line. You got your chance, you soiled it, you were cut. At least you could say you played Big Ten football, right? Wrong, because I don't know what happened in 2019. All I know is that Bryce grinded his ass off, because when he came back in 2020, he was a different beast entirely. He came in and beat out the scholarship punter for the first time in his career and earned a starting spot instead of having it fall in his lap. And while this abbreviated season gave him limited opportunities, for really the first time ever, we saw a glimpse of his greatness. against Michigan, he had a 54-yard average on 5 punts. But yes, we still saw some glimpses of old freshman Bryce with a 24-yard egg of a game against Northwestern. Things would really change in the following season as Bryce would burst onto the scene. And what a great year to have a great year. As one of the key players in Michigan State's best season in recent years, Bryce was soundly leading the special teams as they would go 11 for 2, and he would put up some numbers that probably would have even shocked freshman Bryce. I'm talking about a 58-yard average on 6 punts against Nebraska. I'm talking about a 54-yard average on 5 punts against Miami, a 55.8 against Michigan, helping them sneak out a 37-33 brutal victory in a rivalry game. But his 48.4-yard average would have been the best in the nation the year before, but wasn't even enough to crack the top 5, as the class of punters that year was even more stacked, with 3 punters all breaking 50-yard averages in a single season, with Matt Ariza, Michael Turk, and Ryan Stonehouse, which is something we've never seen in the history of college football before. But with 1 year left in him, it was finally his year. Enter 2022. The stage was set, and there really were only a handful of punters that people had their eyes on, and he was leading the charge. He came out of the gate swinging, highest average in the country for the entire season. Throw on top the highest net average in the nation as well, and he had completed the transformation from walk-on to best punter in the... Oh, come on. He didn't even win the Ray Guy Award? The award literally given to the best college punter in football? Yeah, he didn't win it. Despite having the highest average by nearly 2 yards and the best net by over a yard, showing that ball for ball he was the most effective punter, somehow when it came to recognizing his talent, he was put on the bench yet again. But now, you may come to realize, just like I did, that this is nothing more than another brick in the road for Bryce, another notch in his sword hilt of adversities he'll overcome. So what's next, you may wonder, after this impeccable season? A lot of you already know, because I imagine you're watching this the minute he got drafted or just made a big play in the NFL. And for me, that's exactly what's next. Because after his season, he went to the Reese's Bowl and got 1 punt and broke the Reese's Bowl hang time record like a shell of an egg under his heel with a 5.6 second punt. So that's the Bryce Baringer story. From walk-on to getting cut from his team twice to now one of the best to ever do it at the collegiate level, to what I can only assume is going to be a long and illustrious NFL career if your team was lucky enough to pick him up in the draft. And if that's not a story that can inspire any player, I don't know what is. But have a good day, consider subscribing, and peace.
You know, I was like, when am I going to get my shot? When am I going to get my shot? But then I kind of had a big self-reflection day with Jake, and he was like, you always need to seize the opportunities you're given. And when he said that, I was like, I was just given one in 2018 and didn't make the most of it. So at that point in time, I knew if I'm given another opportunity, I'm not going to throw it away.